This is a dream. And so I come home. We go back to the cabin, I should say. And we got back, 5 or 6 o'clock, whatever it was. And I'm in a good mood and I'm just like tired and I'm just ready to go to bed. Mostly because I just want to get through the night, as fast as I can. And so I climb in bed. The dudes, Wolf and Nick, they're gaming, and I climbed in bed right away. Tucked myself in. It's time to go to bed. But again, I couldn't sleep. Probably because I was just, from the second I got in there, I was thinking, you better fall asleep as fast as you can so you don't have these issues. But I didn't fall asleep. And as much as I tried over the course of the entire evening to tell Nick and Wolf, please, please don't go to bed. Let me fall asleep. At some point it was like midnight again and they're exhausted. They've tried to stay up, but they just can't. And they don't really understand what the big issue is, and Wolf to a degree, but they're kind of like, bro, like go to bed. And so finally they fall asleep. And so once again, I'm laying in this bedroom. Everybody in the house is asleep. It's super dark. There's just this little light from the digital clock. And again, I'm just so upset that I haven't fallen asleep. I'm counting the hours. And I remember as the clock got closer and closer to like 2, 3 in the morning, I was like, please don't let whatever happened the night before happen again. But sure enough, at 3 a.m., right around 3 a.m., I'm laying in my bed. And the one difference I will say about this night to the last is now it seems so ridiculous, but I had taken a kitchen knife and I had put it underneath the top bunk so I could access it. It was like tucked into the springs, to protect myself, And I remember at 3 a.m. when I heard footsteps in the wraparound porch again, my first look was to the knife underneath the bed. And I remember thinking how ridiculous it was that instantly at the sound of those footsteps out there, I couldn't move. I mean, if you've been so scared that you were paralyzed, there's a feeling to that. And I couldn't move. This is also why I've thought that there's a sleep paralysis, because of this so scared you can't move, but there's elements of the story that contradict that. So I hear these footsteps out on the wraparound porch. I'm so scared again. They make their way to the door. The door opens. The sleigh bells ring. The pot falls. It's the same thing. It's repeating itself, which on the one hand was somewhat comforting because it's almost like, okay, I've been through this before. But then on the other hand, you're like, why is this happening? What is this? There's like equal, good and bad here. And again, like in the movies, he would say, oh, well, this is when you alert your friends. You call to them and say, turn the lights on. Let's go confront this thing. In reality, when you believe that like you're in literally a life or death situation, you just don't act that way. You don't. You act in a way that you will only act if you're in these situations. And so the pot falls, the doors open, and these footsteps begin marching across the cabin. And so they're making their way, and they stop, and they begin walking down the hallway towards our room. And, I've said it already, so I don't need to harp on it, but truly, the level of fear at this point was so high that there was a genuine concern for a heart attack laying in bed. The door swings open, this dark figure marches into the room, same as the night before. Can't see its upper half. I just see these hips that are, unnaturally high. It makes its way down the aisle between the queen and the bunk bed, and then folds onto Nick and disappears. And again, I'm not thinking, oh boy, here's my chance. The ghost is gone. It's folded into Nick. Better go, get the cavalry. Instead, I laid awake. Again, 2 nights in a row now, I haven't slept, waiting for this thing to pop back up. So all night, for the most part, I may have dozed off at some point, but I do recall being awake for a really long time after this. Again, thinking the door's open, like, what's happened here? Where is this? But at some point, I kind of come to, I wake up, I suppose, or I come out of this dozing state, and I hear Nick's mom, again, out in the kitchen. And this time, I get out of bed, and I'm far less reserved about what I'm going to say to her, because now this has become an emergency for me. I don't know what's happening, but it's an emergency. And so I get out of the bed and I make my way in there, and I'm upset, like genuinely for real upset. And I don't care, to be honest, about offending her at this point. That's the way I felt. And I was like, what is going on in this house? I couldn't even form a description of what happened, but I was trying to be like, there was something in this house again last night, and it wasn't your son. And I remember the look on her face was empathy. It was sympathy. It was sympathy for me. Because as I'm saying, I'm trying to put together a string of consciousness about what's even happened, and I'm crying half the time. She just says, Sean, you really need to just calm down about this. I heard my husband again last night too. I heard him go into your room. He's not going to hurt you. It's okay. And I was just like, no, this can't be real. I can't be here. I can't do this. I remember thinking I had never wanted my parents so badly. And it was like at this moment as I'm like literally kind of saying to Nick's mom, like, no, that's not what happened. That can't be what happened. Nick and Wolf come out of the room, and I go to them. And now, again, I'm not holding back. I'm telling them what happened. Wolf was pretty shaken by it because he believed me. Nick was more kind of stoic and was like, shut the F up. Like, that didn't happen. But it was this totally surreal moment where Nick's mom really pushed hard to convince me that don't worry, it's my husband. Nick, was basically kind of not reacting or even talking about it. And Wolf is just sitting there looking at me, and I'm like literally crying, trying to make sense of what's happening. It was like the most surreal thing. And we weren't getting anywhere in conversations because I felt like, again, no offense to Nick's mom, I felt like I was dealing with someone who had lost their mind. And I didn't know what was happening in the house. And so I remember eventually just like breaking off with Wolf to like talk to him and figure out what to do here. And, I talked about calling my parents to come get me. I can't be here for another night. We had one more night there. But there was this thinking, I was thinking to myself, like, how will I explain to my parents why they need to come get me? This is a trip that I look forward to every year. But because there was a ghost in the house, I had to come home. It wasn't my personality to be that guy, to do that. I don't think I'd ever really asked my parents, like, come get me from something. There also was this feeling of like, it's one more night. Now that I've at least come out and been kind of aggressive about being upset about this, like, at least it's out in the open. And so ultimately Nick convinced me, I think because he probably didn't want me to leave in some ways because he was now getting nervous, convinced me to stay. One more night. It's one more night. We'll get through it. We'll get home. And so I frankly resigned myself. And it's funny, retrospectively, especially now being a parent, I should have called my parents. I should have just left. It doesn't matter what it was for. I should have just called my parents, but I didn't. So we're going into the last night here. So that day, after I've decided I'm going to stay, despite this being like the worst day of my life, days of my life, we head out to go snowboarding. But before we go to the mountain, me, Nick, Wolf, and Nick's mom, we stop at this local shop and we pick up a wooden, this beautiful like coffee table. Because in the living room of the cabin, there was this little table that sat at the foot of the stairs that led up to the second floor where they kept a landline telephone on. And they just wanted to replace it. They had mentioned it a couple of times. And so we got this coffee table. So we get this coffee table, we load it in the truck, and then we go snowboarding. And then it's a great day of riding. And I kind of convinced myself that it wasn't a big deal. And I told Nick and Wolf, please let me go to bed ahead of you, no matter what it takes, please. We come back, we offloaded this table when we got back to the cabin. We replaced it with the wooden table or whatever it was that was there at the foot of the stairs in the living room. Swap those tables out. We get into our bedrooms, and I get in bed right away, and I couldn't sleep. I'm on 2 days no sleep. I've been snowboarding hard, and I'm just so paranoid. And also a nail in the coffin moment here is we came back that night and found out that for sure Nick's brothers were not going to be making a stop. So we know no one's going to be here that night. So there's no hope. If you hear footsteps, it ain't Nick's brothers. And so I can't sleep, and I'm literally kicking Wolf's bunk and like shaking Nick's bed to keep them awake as the hours creep along and I haven't fallen asleep. But finally, they fall asleep despite my best efforts of really being a jerk, trying to keep them up. And again, I'm laying there in the bed, 3 a.m. rolls around, and I got my stupid knife and the springs that I can't even use, and I hear the footsteps on the wraparound porch. Now, this time, because it's now happened twice, I literally am like, oh my God, it's going to come in here again. I got to get ready for this. But this night was different. I hear the footsteps on the wraparound porch. The door opens. I hear the sleigh bells. The pot falls in the kitchen. And this thing walks into the cabin, and it begins its walk, across the house. And my heart's racing. I'm sweating bullets. I'm so scared. I'm frozen. And it doesn't stop to come down the hallway towards us, towards where our bedroom was. It continued walking straight ahead towards the living room area. And it's a change, right? And you got to remember that the previous couple of nights, this thing has disappeared into the floor. It's disappeared into Nick and just vanished. And so I actually, as I was laying in bed, was looking at the wall straight ahead of me, which, was the wall that led, next door was this living room. And I'm thinking, this thing's going to walk through the wall at any moment. But it walks into the living room, and there's a pause. There's silence in this cabin. I'm just terrified. It doesn't come through the wall. I begin to hear it going up the stairs that lead up to the lofted area. And I remember like the creaking sounds that a couple of the steps made. And just thinking about it made it so real that something with mass, or at least appeared to have mass, was moving around this house. Like, it made a creaking sound on the step. Up the stairs it goes. And again, back to the reference of it's disappeared into the floor several times. I'm thinking, okay, it's going to get to the second floor, and it's going to go through the floor into our room. So I'm looking now at the bunk above me, thinking this thing's going to come through the ceiling, through the bunk, and onto me. And so I'm horrified. The sounds stop once it reaches the second level, which is where Nick's mom sleeps. Sounds stop. It does not come through the ceiling. I have another mostly sleepless night. Out of pure exhaustion, I at some point did fall asleep, but I woke up, probably around the same time the past couple of days, or I should say I heard Nick's mom around the same time, like 5 or 6 in the morning. And even though I didn't know what was going on, I could tell that she was emotional about something. And so at this point, I'm so happy to hear her out there because it means that this trip is over. We're leaving this day. And so I get out of bed and I practically outrun. I quickly make my way out of the bedroom, down the hallway, and I go out there expecting to look over into the kitchen and then the dining room and see Nick's mom, making breakfast, coffee, whatever. But she's not over there, but she is over to the right. At the foot of the stairs that leads up to the second floor, and she's standing over that coffee table that we had purchased the day before and put at the foot of the stairs. And she knows I'm upset. I've walked out. I seem very upset. She's upset. And before any of us say anything, she just looks at me and says, "Come here." And I walk over to her, and I kid you not, scratched into the surface of this table, this wooden table, was the words, "I love you." And she said, "He was here last night. He did this." I don't know what to make of that story. Nick and Wolf don't know what to make of that. I have convinced myself on some days that it just has to be that Nick's mom created this narrative that mirrored what I experienced, that she played on this idea that I was hearing things and it became her husband. But I can't reconcile the idea that I had never had sleep paralysis in my life, never have after, let's say, but 3 nights in a row I have the exact same experience that feels as real as can be, confirmed by an adult. So the story that the question that always comes up in the comments of this on YouTube is, was the door open, when you came out? And truthfully, like, you got to remember that in the moments when I walked out there and interacted with Nick's mom, I was in various stages of like real trauma. I wasn't having like, let's go ahead and do a deep dive on this. Let's do a rational, objective deep dive on what happened. I couldn't even talk. And so there wasn't any real exchange of, let's go over what really happened here. It was more like Nick's mom telling me, "Don't worry, it was him." and me basically trying to be in denial about it. So I don't have an answer with regards to the door. All I know is what I heard, what I experienced, and what was said to me, and that there was those letters and words scratched into that table. And so after that experience, we went home. Candidly, this experience ruined my relationships with, it forever changed my relationships with Nick and Wolf. It was like I simply couldn't deal with it. I stopped snowboarding for the most part after that. Never went back to the cabin, and that is my story. So we're super long on time. Before we go to the outro here, Nick, is there anything you want to end here?
I mean, shout out to like our UK fans, Canadian, Australia, and also to the fans who had donated to David Hartsock and becoming change makers there. And then some funny ones I think here were your crow is now named Edgar Allan Crow.
Nice. That's clever.
That was good. And then, damn dude, I'm stressed. Morgan, I'm Audi 5000. With a few comments on I'm crying. Dang, almost 30 minutes extra time. Thank you. You're the absolute GOAT.
Awesome.
And then Savannah, YouTube version was great. Live version's phenomenal.
I love that. Thank you all so much. Maybe it's egotistical of me, but I love like this as an opportunity, or I should say like this experience is something that, I feel so fortunate to even have the opportunity to do. I think you all should know that this is not something that like really comes easily, let's say. This is something that I really have to will myself to do it live, let's say. But it's just one of those experiences telling stories to a real audience that's hard to beat. And it's been a pleasure to get to do it with you all. I can't thank you enough. And before we go to, I think, a very quick intermission between this and the after party, I do want to say that, if you are a huge fan of The Strange, Dark, and Mysterious and you're here, just know that in addition to the YouTube channel, Mr. Ballen, we also have a podcast called the Mr. Ballen Podcast, where we put out exclusive brand new stories on Monday mornings, and on Thursday mornings we put out the remastered audio of our best YouTube videos. It's called the Mr. Ballen Podcast, and it's available exclusively on Amazon Music. So please check that out if you haven't already. And then also another big announcement is that we actually just launched a brand new website, ballenstudios.com. If you haven't been, I guess, following along, although admittedly, I don't know how many updates I've even given about this, but if you haven't been following along, we're in the middle of doing a host of projects, including, books. Go to the web, instead of just saying it, go to the website, ballenstudios.com. And check it out. It's a beautiful website. I admittedly had little to do with it. Nick, put the camera on Nick for a minute. Shout out to him and his team. They're the ones that worked literally for months to figure out what works. And it's an incredible website that you really should check out. And we're going to be putting all of updates and upcoming shows and events and that kind of thing on there. So yeah, that's going to do it. I want to say again, thank you so much. Geez, it's 9:44. I could probably do this for another 4 or 5 hours. So this I feel like this means, we gotta step up the live tour potentially. But thank you all so much. We're gonna go to the live after show.
Yep.
And I think that for those that have tickets for that, Nick, how does this work for people that have after show stuff? Do you know? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, Matt, do you want to say how simple it'll be to transfer over?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be easy to do. And we'll make sure once we start the after party that we don't just immediately roll into it. We'll give you a little grace period. We'll shift over there, but it should be just as easy as getting on this live stream. So at this time, thanks again to Moment for having the show. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. Thank you. And Matt, Matt is here. He's producing the show for us tonight. I'm going to have you shift over to intermission, and then we'll go to the after party. Thank you all so much. Happy Ballentine's Day.